And a big welcome to the show, Wellington Mayor Tory Whanau. Tory, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Kia ora.
I was just saying to you before we started, I think this is our first official hello. So hello and nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, cool, man. What I want to ask you about your stuff as well. Maybe we'll do that at the end because it's interesting. Because I know you're not really standing for the mayoralty.
Yes.
But maybe we'll get to that at the end, should we find time, because kind of the topic du jour today, which is going up and going around the media again, is our French Canadian friend, Mr. David Seymour, and his comments and his apparent lackadaisical attitude towards what some are describing as bullying online, like if anyone else did it. Now, I'm not going to be too precious about it. I don't think it's particularly serious and stuff what he's doing as a human being, but as a acting Prime Minister and Minister of the Crown, that does give perhaps a different expectation of behaviour that he doesn't seem to be fulfilling. So why don't we do this? And the reason I say this is hanging around is because this is a news story today. And this was a conversation over the weekend, and this was from a stand-up yesterday. So I believe you enacted or certainly spoke out for the first time in the weekend. So before we go to what we were at now, tell us why you started a public conversation around this and around what David Seymour and ACT are doing with their ridiculing of people who don't agree with them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I saw it kick off around about Saturday on Blue Sky. And I'd seen a report by an academic who reported that Matiria Ture, after she'd been put up as one of his posts, the level of misogyny, racism, and online abuse escalated quite significantly. So I looked into it more, and I hadn't actually realised at that point that he'd spoken about several academics, but also the Christchurch Council. And, jokes or lols or whatever, referring to council staff as Putin and labelling academics as derangement syndrome or whatever, I just thought is pretty unbecoming of an acting Prime Minister. But what bothers me the most, and I'm sure that he knows that every time he criticises someone, it leads to that online wave of his support groups and his trolls towards these people.
To be fair, and I apologise that I didn't know this, we talked a bit about this last night, and we talked about they would unleash his incel foot soldiers on the people, but I hadn't actually heard whether it happened or not. So you're saying the reports from the weekend you saw is Matiria was getting some extra attention once Seymour had put out his derangement syndrome tweet. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Sanjawa, I believe, who's an expert on disinformation and online extremism, he analysed like 1,200 Facebook comments, and there was certainly a significant spike after that post had been made. And even when, so I put up my letter online and stuff, I decided to take action, and now he's sending his people after me. And it's just such a pattern. It's an ongoing pattern that we saw with him, but we saw it with the previous Deputy Mayor, Winston Peters, as well, is when they vocalise these quite harmful views, whether it's a joke or not, they might think it's lighthearted, but it doesn't, it's not lighthearted for the person they intend it for because of the political landscape online. Yeah. And as someone who's experienced this for the last couple of years, this is why I'm so passionate about it. What it can really do to someone is completely, well, the intention that it has, and we know this from kind of like playbooks from overseas, is that it seeks to dehumanize the expertise at large and create distrust in that person for simply having a view against what he believes in. And that has a kind of a dangerous sort of ongoing impact. And what I also dislike is between him and the previous Deputy Prime Minister is the general behaviour of calling people names and referring to an MP as a pedophile. They're moving the goalpost of what is acceptable behaviour for those in public office. And in my view, that's just not okay. And if we don't challenge it now, it just becomes normalised.
There is also that huge irony is that these people who you're talking of, Mr. Peters, Mr. Seymour, in the last month or so have come out very aggressively against, I think it might have been Chloe, talking about imported culture wars. And what they're doing is literally an imported culture war from America. It's
100%.
Trump derangement syndrome. It's
Yeah.
calling Democrats, groomers. It's literally what they are coming out saying. Oh, look at these lunatics saying this, but they are demonstrating, they are affirming the accusation that's been made about people importing culture wars.
Oh, absolutely. And then they kind of give themselves a protective layer going, oh, I'm just kidding. That doesn't make it acceptable.
Or I'm just asking questions. That's
I'm
the
just
other one
asking
I like
questions.
to use.
And look, in the past when I've received comments from, online trolls or whatever, I just kind of ignore it because it's on me and I don't want to amplify the situation. What's different about this is that he's going after a number of people. And so I felt some sort of civic duty to speak up on behalf of them. But again, for me, it's about our current government moving the goalposts for what is acceptable behaviour for the executive, let alone public office. And it's not allowing, our public servants, our academics, or even the general public to feel intimidated by submitting or participating in a democratic process in future. This is democracy. So, and I find it really funny that, he talks about how important freedom of speech is and their lobby groups as well. But the second people do it in a democratic nature, they just seem to go off, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's very obvious to most of us observing that there are people, especially on the right, who scream freedom of speech until it's speech they don't like. And then all of a sudden they're all offended, or especially if it's looking around topics which we're not talking about today, like the Middle East. If you share views around that, all of a sudden your speech should be suppressed. I've got a question, though. The question I have is not... the question I have doesn't matter about how the serious nature of getting attacked online, but I think it's got a huge implication as to the responsibility for people like Seymour speaking out. Because you said something interesting. You said he set his trolls on us, or you mightn't use the word trolls. Do you think that people like David Seymour, who we're talking about today, actively knows exactly what's going to happen, i.e., can we hold him responsible for the actions of those trolls because he knows what they're going to go and do, or are they doing it sort of and he's just saying stuff that he wants to say?
I would be surprised if he didn't know. I mean, he's been in the game for many years. It's actually, I don't agree with his policies or what he does, but he's actually a seasoned and an effective politician. Look how much power he's been able to gain with even just a minority of votes. So I would say politically, he's probably quite aware of what is happening because, well, it's actually been reported on numerous times in recent days because of the increase in online abuse in general against progressive politicians and women. So surely you'd have to be aware of that. But whether he's sending them off, I don't know. I feel like some of his rhetoric would probably empower certain groups to behave that way online.
It does seem particularly evident that women, and then women of colour, are two of his chosen targets above and beyond anyone else. Statistically speaking, it looks like that it's pretty clear there is a little bit more direction at women and women of colour compared to others in his calling people out for their derangement, quote unquote.
Yeah, the majority are women that I've seen online, and actually that's probably quite common with the Prime Minister and the previous Deputy Prime Minister of their criticisms of other people. Progressive, queer, Māori. And this is something I actually saw when I was in Parliament almost 8 years ago. The way that he'd talk about Gora's Garaman in the media would absolutely spark online violence towards her, which ended up leading to her needing a security escort. And I remember calling him back then and saying, hey, can you tone down your public comments? Because it's actually causing safety concerns for Goras. So he knows about this because we talked about it almost 8 years ago.
So for clarity, and I know you've just said it, but I like to repeat things sometimes to make sure we're all clear. You have a one-on-one personal interaction with him, telling him what this does online if he's not aware, so you can testify that he knows.
Correct. And I said that directly about Golriz Gutterman. And, we came to an agreement on that phone call, but he, in the end, he didn't really listen. And she continued to receive horrific abuse ongoing. And look what that did to her mental health. And this is the concern I have for our people. But she's had a really tough few months, right? She's a close friend of mine, and I support her. But just imagine being a refugee into this country, and for almost 2-3 years straight, being told, at least on a weekly basis, you need to be hanged. And this kind of right-wing derangement system, rhetoric, you're so stupid, I'm just kidding, that has a major contribution to this behaviour towards our politicians, and it has a significant impact, as we have seen with Golriz.
It's interesting, and I often talk about the media as the people with access, because especially people on the right won't talk to us, for example, and fair play. There's no obligation for them to. But I haven't heard anyone with access, media sitting in Parliament, ask him if he denounces the actions of these trolls. Ask him if he would reject the voters of those trolls and see what he's got to say. I know in America, like when it's an extreme version, but when people like Nick Fuentes are often brought up, even Trump was very reticent at kind of saying he didn't want Nick Fuentes' vote. I wish someone with some access would pressure Mr. Seymour on some of those questions and see where he came out, because he has to generate a certain amount of ugliness to sustain the base with the red meat that he's been delivering them over the past 2, 3, 4 years. So, yeah.
Correct.
Let's just have a quick look then. So this is the story that was out. I think this is actually out today. I think so. David Seymour defends posts accusing opponents of derangement syndrome. The Deputy Prime Minister is rubbishing claims that social media posts he has made about opponents of Regulatory Standards Bill are a breach of the Cabinet Manual. Hey, one quick question as a politician yourself. He says, right, they're making this sound like they're his posts. He's not going to be the one posting these. I mean, his name's on it. He's authorised them, but it's going to be an underling that's making up these things and actually putting them out there that way.
Correct.
In your experience, would he have had to authorise it before they went out, those derangement pictures?
Yep. So, my team never post anything without me seeing it first, because in the end, I'm the one that has to take responsibility. If there was a really offensive post on my social media that one of my staff did, well, I would still take responsibility for it, because it's my channel and they've received direction from me. So even though he didn't technically press publish, he is responsible for that content.
Yep. 100%. All right. So this is actually, we talked about this last night, and I didn't have this footage to hand. I had watched the press conference yesterday, though. This is David Seymour actually responding to what you've done in the weekend. And so this is his response directly to you.
Can I just ask you about this letter that Tory Whanau has said that she has sent to the Prime Minister, having a bit of a crack at the fact of what she says is, quote, unacceptable behaviour around you targeting people that oppose the Regulatory Standards Bill. She says that it breaches the Cabinet Manual. Just curious about what your response to that is.
So sorry, Tory Whanau is accusing me of inappropriate behaviour.
Yeah,
I've heard it all.
Yeah.
There's no such breach. If people want to go out and make completely incorrect statements, then I'm going to get a bit playful and have some fun with them.
Is just being playful and having a bit of fun with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just back on
I could say other things about them. I could say that their incorrect statements are deliberate and therefore they're lying. I could say they're incapable of understanding what they're saying. I'm not saying that. I'm being a bit playful, saying the only reason I can think of for all these totally factually incorrect statements about the Regulatory Standards Bill is that there's some sort of sinister syndrome out there.
Now, as a communicator and working in radio and stuff for a very long time, one of the things I find fascinating about this is he had an out to go to the next question, and he didn't take it. I'll just play this a little bit again.
Me of inappropriate behaviour.
Yeah.
I've heard it all.
Yeah.
Right there, he's now getting more questions.
Yeah.
The conversation's over, yet he continues for another 30 seconds or so because he basically wants to say people are lying.
Yes.
Well, there's no such breach. If people want to go out and make
Really?
completely incorrect statements, then I'm going to get a bit playful and have some fun with them.
Stop. That's a statement finished. New questions come in, and then he keeps going.
Is just being playful and having a bit of fun with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I find that from, I guess, an observer of politicians and someone who, communication's my tools, a very interesting decision he chose to make. How do you respond to what he said in there?
So there are a couple of very interesting things, and I agree. So he's given the opportunity to just reiterate his lines and calling people liars, again, dehumanizing people, making them to be the bad people for actually the experts on legislation like this. So, and he's not been held to account for that. And actually, it's the same as, there are a lot of journalists who print his press releases word for word. And what he's saying is not being challenged. So that's very problematic. The other is actually the slight he made towards me and inappropriate behaviour. So watch over the next few days as him and his people aim to dehumanise me over the next few days. I can see it now. And that's why why I'm speaking up is that I'm also trying to kind of build a bit of a kind of for us as a collective. I think it's fantastic that you're talking about this. Radio Wātea did a fantastic job of talking about it because we have to, this is their way of silencing politicians and people, but we have to keep pushing back on it because in the long term, that impacts democracy.
Yeah, silencing dissenters, silencing
Yes,
people
correct.
who disagree with him. Basically, what's happening is he is calling people deranged who
Yes.
don't agree with him.
100%.
That's it. And just on that note, there's another 30 seconds here from the press conference from yesterday when he was asked directly about calling academics deranged.
So do you stand by your social media team, their comments around Dr. Laking, that he is deranged, the comments that he is making, and that his
because there's been no such comment made. The comment that has been made is that there's some sort of curious syndrome that is causing people to say untrue things.
So he's saying that they didn't call the person deranged, but the curious condition is derangement syndrome. Splitting hairs.
True things. That is
derangement.
yes. There's a syndrome, but that doesn't mean that the person's deranged.
So you stand by that comment?
Yes, but not the way you understand it.
So so that was his response to speaking to others about calling other people deranged. That he didn't call them deranged, even though the and I am putting air quotes here for the audio podcast.
Yes.
The joke
Yes.
is the RSB derangement syndrome.
Yes.
So I don't know how someone who has a syndrome that is a derangement syndrome can't then be deranged. That's what they're saying. But that's his offhand response to that. You got any thoughts around that?
Well, again, it just keeps going back to that casting public doubt in these academics who are our smartest people. So calling them deranged or derangement syndrome and liars is actually, it's close to defamation, I would have to say. But again, he's getting away with it. What would be really fantastic is if we saw journalists actually just completely challenging him on that behaviour, or Cabinet Office, the Cabinet Secretary, the Prime Minister going, you know what, this behaviour for a Deputy Prime Minister, Acting Prime Minister is not okay. Our country expects our leaders to look after us, not make fun of us.
Yeah. And now down to the kind of core of the conversation. I think your complaint, you openly talked about the Cabinet Manual. Here is 2.53, conduct, public duty and personal interests in general, to protect the dignity of the decision-making process of executive government and to maintain public trust in the executive, to be able to trust David Seymour, what it's literally saying. Ministers and parliamentary undersecretaries must conduct themselves in a manner appropriate to their office.
Yes.
There is also calls, I'm not sure whether you did this, but 2.56 as well. In all of these roles at all times, ministers are expected to act lawfully and behave in a way that upholds and is seen to uphold the highest ethical and behavioural standards. I don't know how he could say that is not a breach. I mean, you might you might say that it's not the worst crime in the world, but if it's the highest, the highest ethical and behavioural. So in other words, if it's not the highest behavioural standard, if you're a little bit bad behaved, then you're in breach of the Cabinet Handbook. It's very clear.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right in saying it's not the worst thing I've heard actually with this government. I've heard, far more harmful things, but this was just, we have a direct connection to the Cabinet Manual here to be able to go, hey, and actually have had enough of this, high school behaviour from some of our ministers. I don't know about you, but I know for me, I've had enough. I just expect better from our elected officials. I would just plead with the Prime Minister, set a standard of your coalition, because then, you start to lose the trust of the public, even just for this government. And is that what they want? I don't know, but yeah.
Hey, Tory, thanks for joining us tonight. Just before we go, not rerunning for mayor, what are your plans for the next, what's the 5-year plan, Tory? What are you looking at doing?
The 5-year plan is that I still intend on being with council. So, I care deeply about our city, and I believe in the long-term plan that we have signed off, because it's a great investment plan and ensures that we're going to get the best outcomes. I decided not to run for the mayoralty because of much of what we've discussed today. It's very difficult being a wahine Māori in a role like this. And I just felt, if I ran for the Māori ward instead, it's a much safer environment. I have one vote, just like the mayor does, and it means I get to work with iwi and be a good role model for rangatahi Māori. It sounded like quite, others would go, oh, she's going backwards. Not at all. It's. I feel like it's an elegance, just taking a back seat for now, so that I can focus on the kaupapa, not some of these theatrics that we're seeing play out now this week.
Any ambitions to get back into the national game with the Greens or anything?
Oh, absolutely. I love community work. I love legislation, progressive legislation, and challenging some of our other politicians who I feel are putting through harmful laws. So one day, look, I'll go and stand for the Greens, but I feel my heart right now is with Wellington City.
I like that you used the word progressive. I was listening to a debate between two people from America. It was a Democrat and a Republican. And the Democrat guy said, or the Democrat supporter said, every policy that's ever moved us forward had been a progressive policy. And he mentioned things like ending slavery and civil rights and that. And of course, the person went, well, that happened under Republicans. And he went, yeah, that's why I'm saying progressive, not Democrat or Republican. As yes, the Republicans, Lincoln was a Republican, but that's when they were the progressive party, didn't become the regressive party. So I like that you said that. Hey, Tory, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I hope we get to chat to you again super soon. This was fun. Well, it's not a fun topic, but it was lovely to meet you and have an actual chat about it. So thanks for giving us some time tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.